Today my guest is Karl Swedberg. Karl, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. Karl, you're what do you do?
I am a front-end developer, web developer, basically. I do a lot of different things with the web, but my main focus is with JavaScript, and in particular jQuery.
All right. And jQuery isn't just a passing interest with you. You've written books on the subject.
Yeah, I know. I'm in love with it.
All right. Let's see the book. What's the name?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is the second edition of the Learning jQuery series of books, and I have another book called the jQuery Reference Guide, and the most recent version of that is jQuery 1.4 Reference Guide.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's and I should say I'm not the sole author. My co-author is Jonathan Schaffer,
Okay.
a brilliant guy who is great when I don't understand something. He figures out the
need
hard
those
things.
guys in your life.
I know. It's awesome.
So let's talk about jQuery. This is the first show I've ever done on jQuery. Can you just tell us what it is?
Yeah, sure. It's jQuery is a JavaScript library. Okay, so jQuery is JavaScript. Okay, and it's a JavaScript file that you include on your web page, and what it does is a couple things. Well, first of all, it provides you with a whole set of convenience functions that you can use to make things happen on your web page, and it's it works on this third layer of the web page, right? So you have your content and the structure,
And that's HTML.
right? HTML typically, and then you have your presentation, which is your CSS.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have your interaction, which is JavaScript.
Okay.
Right? And of course you have interaction on the server too, but that requires a request to the server, so it requires a browser refresh, basically, right?
And it tends to be slow.
Right. So you can do a lot of cool things without having to refresh the browser, but that requires doing it on the client, on the computer itself. And so when a user downloads a web browser, so like say Internet Explorer or Firefox or Safari or Chrome or whatever, they are actually running that code on their computer, as opposed to when you fill out a form, you hit the button, it sends the request back to the server. That programming logic is done on the server, and then you get your results, right? And so because of that, JavaScript is a really big, tangled web of different competing interests, right? Because you have all of these different people's computers who are configured differently with different browsers and different amounts of power and memory, that sort of thing.
Okay, so sure, this is a challenge. If I'm running server-side code, usually I know what that server is going to be that I'm going to run on.
Exactly.
If I can't control it, then I at least know what it is, and I can write my code that takes advantage of exactly how much memory it has, exactly which operating system it has,
Right.
exactly which software is installed on that, and so on.
Yep.
If I'm writing code to run on on a client, I don't know if that client's going to exist inside of a large university. I don't know if it's going to be in the back of a trailer somewhere in Nebraska. It
Right.
could be on a mountaintop in Austria. I don't know that.
That's
And
right.
I have to accommodate for all those things.
That's right.
That's the challenge of JavaScript.
Absolutely.
Client-side coding it all.
Yeah, right. And then so you have that, and then you have the different added to their computing environment. You have the different browsers and how they implement things like the DOM, the document object models. And that's the thing that
And what is the DOM?
the DOM. It's the document object model. It's basically the kind of the parsed representation. It's like a tree structure of your HTML.
Okay.
Of your
Right.
document.
So we want to manipulate that
Right.
tree structure.
That's right.
All
Right. So so the different browsers have different implementations of their engines that handle all that kind of manipulation.
Right.
And they're quirky. They have all sorts of bugs, and even when they fix a bug in one version, like say, just for example, Internet Explorer 8, they do a better job of some of this stuff, then IE7 and especially IE6, right? But you still, as a front-end developer, you still have to accommodate people who are using IE6.
Well, you don't have to, but you'll be a broader audience if you do.
That's right.
Personally,
Yeah.
I think IE6 should be stricken from the English language, not only technologically, but culturally as well.
Yeah, well, I think anybody who spends any time in web development feels the same way. But whether I want that to happen,
Yeah, but the real world is, the realistic is,
Sure,
there's
sure,
people
right.
using that browser, and if you choose to ignore them, you're ignoring a lot of users.
right, and especially if you're working at a place like where I work, where it's a small web development company, we have clients that pay us to develop their websites, and they want and they use their websites to make money, and they don't want to lock out
Right.
a large percentage of their
You're
users.
potentially turning away revenue there.
Right, right. So we need to make sure that it works wherever people are using it.
Okay, so
And so-
JavaScript's a way of doing that, but JavaScript has a challenge that you need to write JavaScript for every one of these browsers. Is that the idea? Every version of every browser that's out there?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say every version of every browser.
Okay.
In the good old days, what people would do is they would say, well, I mean, there were only two major browsers
Right.
back in the
IE
90s.
and Netscape Navigator.
That's right. And so they would often pick one, and they say, and then they put a little badge on the website and say, this page is best viewed with IE4, Internet
Yeah,
Explorer.
and then a link to download that.
Right. We don't do that. Nobody really does that anymore.
Right.
It's just not. It's not nice.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so.
It's a barrier to entry.
But,
It's
yeah,
a barrier
right,
to your
exactly.
website. You want to make it frictionless as possible.
Yeah. However, I mean, we're not writing JavaScript code that works, that's guaranteed to work in IE4 anymore.
I see.
There are certain points where you just have to say, it's so old and the percentage of users is so marginal that we can't spend more developer resources.
Sure, but at least you
doing
want to
it.
hit the large majority of them by hitting the last few versions of Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Safari.
Yeah.
And that's probably sufficient. There might be some other browsers out there that.
Right. Yeah, right. And then there are mobile browsers too, but
Oh, good point. Yeah.
but in any case, that's right. And to do that natively with JavaScript is very difficult. So jQuery does that for you. So you can write JavaScript code, which is what jQuery is, and you can take advantage of this tool set that jQuery gives you, and it has already dealt with browser differences. And it doesn't do that by trying to determine what browser it is. It does it by trying to determine whether or not a particular feature is available.
Right.
And if it's not, then there's a fallback. And so, you have to be aware of what different things are, how different things are done in different browsers, certainly. There are different method names, different property names like, inner height, client height, page X, client X,
Right.
page X, I said page X. Anyway.
So jQuery just abstracts that away, and they can give you a single property name or a single method name.
That's right.
That internally, inside that function, it's going to use the appropriate one for that browser, whichever one that browser
Exactly.
supports.
Yeah. So it'll check. Okay, does this property exist? Or great, I'll use it. Oh, it doesn't exist. Oh, okay. Well, I'll try this other one. Does that exist? Yeah. And
Sure.
yeah.
It's a lot of ugly code to write
It is.
that you don't have to write.
That's right.
Okay.
Right, and that's one of the things that makes jQuery so nice to use. So you don't have to worry so much about browser differences. Like I mean, there are certain things that jQuery can't abstract away. For example, if you create an object, right, and they're key value pairs, right, and each key is separated from its value by a colon, and each pair is separated by a comma.
Okay.
right? And it's a common convention, right?
Sure.
I mean, and so you have a comma after each one. The ECMAScript standard, which is what JavaScript is based on, says that the last key value pair can't have a trailing comma in it. Okay, but Chrome, Safari, Firefox, they're forgiving of that.
Okay.
So they'll ignore a trailing comma. Internet Explorer won't. There's no way jQuery can go in and say, oh, you have a trailing comma there, I'm going to somehow try to remove it or something. It'll throw an error in Internet Explorer if you write bad code, right? I mean, jQuery can't do everything for you. That's a case where Internet Explorer actually is adhering more strictly to the standard than the others. The others are more forgiving.
Sure. Okay.
But in any case, the point was that it can't do everything for you.
So
it
you as a
can't,
jQuery
it can't save you
developer,
from yourself.
You have to know that as a jQuery developer. You can
Sure.
forget about some of the other quirks, but some of the things you still have to understand the language.
Yeah, just like fundamentals of the JavaScript language.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So jQuery isn't the only framework that abstracts away the complexities of JavaScript.
No, not at all.
And the complexities of dealing with multiple browsers. Why did you choose jQuery?
Good question. Well, when I started down this road, I was just learning JavaScript, and I had been an English teacher. I was an English major, and so I didn't really have any programming experience. And so I was trying to teach myself JavaScript. A friend of mine wanted me to do a website for her and have like this little lightboxy type of effect on for some of her paintings. So I was looking around, Prototype, Scriptaculous had this cool lightbox thing. And so I thought, hey, this looked like something, this was JavaScript, it looked like something that could help me out with my JavaScript learning, right? Prototype. But beyond that little lightbox plugin, I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And it was mostly because of my ignorance, but hey, there was a barrier to entry there that I just couldn't get through. But as I was searching around, I ran across another lightbox type of thing written for jQuery. And jQuery had only been around for a couple months at that point. And I looked at that, and then I looked at the jQuery.com homepage, and there were a couple of really simple examples, but when I looked at them, it immediately made sense to me. It was just like, it was revolutionary. I was like, wow, this is just like CSS basically, because it all starts with selecting elements in the DOM, right? So on your web page, you're selecting, you're grabbing a bunch of stuff, and it uses the CSS syntax to do that. And I was already pretty adept at CSS. I understood all sorts of and I even, I kind of geeked out on it. So I learned some of the more advanced CSS selectors, even though I couldn't use most of them because Internet Explorer 6 didn't support them. And this was a few years ago, and that was especially an issue at that point.
Sure.
So
before I started my campaign to eradicate it.
that's right. yeah, which we all thank you for. But anyway, so that it made immediate sense to me, and really there weren't a whole lot of other frameworks on the block at that point, at least not that I knew of. There were some, but I wasn't in that. I wasn't in this whole environment. Like I was really green. I was just like kind of grabbing at something.
This is a common thing. You found the first thing that worked.
Yeah.
And for you, and you went with that one.
That's
It sounds
right.
like you've hitched your cart to the right horse here, because the popularity of jQuery has just exploded in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so, and even Microsoft is embracing it. It ships with a new version of Visual Studio, and it's a huge part of their MVC framework. And I'm a .NET developer, so that's where
Okay.
I'm coming from. But I know it's big in a lot of other frameworks as well, platforms and languages.
Are your friends also .NET developers?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
they're like any technology.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what kind of technology your friends use. I don't know.
So let's talk a little bit about the syntax. Though they are technologists. People who watch
okay.
this, they tend to geek out on stuff, as you
Okay.
said. And so how does I'm a developer. I'm writing a web page. I want to do something to manipulate the DOM.
Right.
I want to use jQuery to do it. What does that code look like?
Okay, well, typically you start with the $, right? And the $, in JavaScript doesn't have any special meaning, okay? Like in PHP, your variables have to begin with the $. In JavaScript, the $, is just like any other character, right? So I think Prototype was the first to do this. It used the $, as the name of a function. That was its function name, and I think they did it because, well, I don't know, maybe it was cute, and but also because it's like one character, and it's a kind of a unique character, right? It's not something that typically other people would name their function.
Sure. So it doesn't
right?
get in the way of anything else.
Right, until the other JavaScript libraries came along and wanted to use it too. However, with jQuery, the $, is just an alias of the jQuery function. So if you wanted to avoid using the $, if you live in Europe and you prefer the euro, well, you can't use the euro, but you can't use that symbol, but but you could use jQuery instead, or you could map it to whatever you wanted.
So $sign is just a shortcut for jQuery.
Exactly.
All right.
Yep.
So what does the $sign do in jQuery?
The $sign does just about everything, actually. But at its simplest, what it does is you have your $sign and then you have your parens, right? And so you're calling this function.
Okay.
And you pass in an argument. Typically, what you do is you put in a CSS selector into those parentheses,
Okay.
right? And that CSS selector will search through the document and select all of those elements that match what your selector is. So, like if you had, div, just div, it would find all the divs there. Okay, and then what it does is it bundles all of those up together, puts them in this little object here, right? And it's an array-like object, so it has a length, so you can see how many of them you have in there. But in any case, and it returns that.
Okay.
That way, now that you have this collection of things that you've found, you can do something with them, right? And so you can just attach another method to it. So after that, you just do dot and then call another method, another jQuery method.
Okay. And that method will act on the returned set
Of
objects
elements.
that met that criteria.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So what's an example of some method that you would call that would act on?
Okay, just
What can we do with JavaScript, or with jQuery? I mean, that's,
okay, very, very basic example. Let's say you have a table, and you're not able to access the server-side code, right? So you can't. That's locked down to you or whatever, right?
Or you don't want to because
Yeah,
you don't want to you're reloading the page all the time.
Yeah, right. But you want to stripe the table rows. Okay.
Stripe, meaning alternate colors.
Yeah, alternate colors. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, right. So, very simple thing to do would be in your style sheet, you'd have a class and you'd call it like alt or something, tr.alt, and then you'd say like, okay, I want background color to be blue. All right. So then in jQuery, you would have your $sign, your parens, and then for your selector, you'd want to select table rows.
Okay.
Right? So you do a TR because that's table row.
You get a collection of all the table rows
That's
in your
right.
document.
That's right. And then I'll get back to refining that in a minute, but then what you would do is you say dot after the parens, dot add class. And then in parens you'd put the alt class in there.
Okay.
It's a string, so you put it in quotes. But anyway, and that would apply that class to every single table row.
Okay.
We don't want to do that, but yeah. So a very simple example of how you would manipulate something in the DOM with jQuery, right? If you wanted to alternate the rows, well, you probably would want to avoid the ones that appeared in the head, the T head, right? And so you'd do like T body, and then a space, and then TR, right? And so now we're only getting the table body rows. Okay. And then we would use, we'd want to narrow it down even further. And jQuery has a couple custom selectors, even and odd, that could do this for us. Problem with doing that is that it will, those will give us the even or odd elements like all the way through of whatever's been collected so far.
So if you've done T-body, TR, then all of the, you say dot even, I think it's dot even, right?
Yeah,
then
right.
you'll get only the rows 2, 4, 6, 8 of that, the TRs within T-body.
That's right.
Okay.
But if you had multiple T-bodies,
Okay?
right, it would treat all of those even ones as a whole.
Okay.
So it wouldn't account for like say you know the thing that a lot of I don't know clients want is they want not the first row under the not the first row of the table body to be styled differently, but you know the second one.
Okay.
But they want the second one of each. They don't want But if you're just using even, it'll do the collection as a whole, and so it'll just keep alternating no matter if the first one ended on an odd or an even or whatever.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So there's another selector called nth child. So you would just do colon nth nth hyphen child, and then in parens in there you would just say even.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. By the way, the custom jQuery even wouldn't select the second, fourth, sixth. It would select the first, third, fifth. Because JavaScript, as with most programming languages, is zero indexed.
Okay. So it'd be the even numbers of the index.
That's right.
As opposed
It's a little
even-
counterintuitive.
even element of the collection.
Right. Right. The only selector in jQuery that's different from that is the nth child one. Nth child is one based, and that's because that is the nth child selector is part of the CSS3 spec, and it's the CSS spec is one based, and there's no equivalent JavaScript or DOM nth child property, right? And so to make it compatible with the specification, we make it one based.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we're talking about $sign tells your code that
This is a
jQuery is coming
function.
up.
Yep.
First thing is typically a selector, and the selector
Yep.
can be as simple as just TD, element or a class name.
Right.
It can also be more complex, like
That's right.
some hierarchical selectors inside of it, and some custom selectors like the even or the odd. And then after that, followed by some action to take on it, like applying a style to these, like
That's right.
alt class to
That's right.
everything. And that's good. I don't want to dive too much into the code because we don't really have a computer here to show it off.
That's right. Yeah. I
But,
mean, I'm describing all this stuff, and
yeah,
I'm
sure.
using my hands to show
Conceptually, I think you've done a great
parentheses.
job
No.
to talk about how this is done.
Sure.
But what I do want to do is, if I want to get started in this, there's source code that I need to download or link to.
That's right.
How do that?
Yeah, right. So when you want to use jQuery, you need to reference the jQuery core file. You can either download that directly from jQuery.com, so you can go there, download it, put it in your local project, whatever, and you just include that or reference that either in the head or often now people are putting their scripts at the end of the body. But in any case, either way, you can put it there. And after that, you reference your own custom script that you've written to take advantage of jQuery.
Right.
Right? So you're calling the jQuery methods that are in that core file. Right? And whether you put it in the head or at the end of the body, it's important to have the jQuery file come after your style sheet references.
Why is that?
That's because some of the because if you have JavaScript code that relies on the dimensions of elements on your page, and those elements and those dimensions are determined by your style sheet, that style sheet needs to be
Applied.
executed first in order for those dimensions to
Okay.
take effect.
Fair enough.
Right. I mean, it's not always necessary, but it's a good practice.
Okay, all right. All right, that's a really good overview of jQuery. Is there anything else you can tell us
About jQuery?
about jQuery? Or how about this? Well, where's another good resource? Of course, we know about this book, Learning jQuery 1.3 from Pact Publishing.
Yeah.
And what else? What's another good resource?
I have a blog, learningjquery.com,
Okay.
and there are a lot of tutorials on that. There's another blog called jQuery for Designers. That's Remy Sharp does a really nice job of that sort of thing. But yeah, and then there are other books as well. Some that have been written by by other members of the jQuery team that are fantastic books. jQuery Cookbook, jQuery Enlightenment. The jQuery in Action, there's a second edition of that out now. There's a new one called jQuery Novice to Ninja. All of those are recommended.
Okay.
But you know, some people love reading books, and some people are patient enough to go through tutorial sites, but also people want answers to their specific questions right away, right? So for that, there's a forum. jQuery, it's forum.jquery.com.
Okay.
So you can go there, you can ask your questions. It's a very active forum. Hopefully somebody will give you a good answer.
So same place I download from the source code from.
Yeah,
And also as a forum to support that.
Actually, yeah. So jQuery.com without a subdomain is like that's
Starting
where you
point.
would, that's like the, yeah. But if you go forum.jQuery.com, if you go to api.jQuery.com, that's where you can find all of the method names with descriptions of what they do and examples, and sometimes with many of them they have running demos right on the method page.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go through there, search through there, find what you need. They're categorized, and that whole API site is based on the jQuery reference guide that Jonathan and I wrote. So we completely revamped the online documentation of jQuery just a couple months ago.
Okay. I've been spending a lot of time actually recently on that API.
Oh, no
site.
kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done a jQuery project. I just finished one a few days ago. It's
Oh,
very
nice.
well written.
Oh, cool. Oh, thank
And
you.
I'm kind of a novice myself, so it was really helpful for me.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge. It's more of a challenge for the online documentation now, because the people who buy the book are a little bit self-selecting, right? And they tend not to be the experts. So we kind of targeted the book more towards beginner intermediate, right? However, when you have one official documentation source online, it needs to be easy enough for the absolute beginners to understand, but it also has to be thorough enough and complex enough for the experts to really get what they need out of it. So yeah, so that's a big challenge.
And I can't speak to all those groups, but I can say that I did a lot of copying and pasting out of the samples
Oh, good.
on that API, which
Good.
helped me out a lot.
That's nice.
I realized it's not working. Oh, I see. I need a parentheses here instead of a dot,
Right.
which isn't always intuitively obvious to me.
Okay.
So, great
Yeah.
learning experience. I didn't realize you'd contributed to that. That's great.
Yeah. So it's like a direct lift from the book.
Okay.
And the publisher is working with, jQuery is part of the Software Freedom Conservancy. And so Pact Publishing is working with them to open up the licensing. We kind of jumped the gun on that process by making the book available as the online documentation. But they're pretty much, they haven't figured out the exact terms, but it's going to be some kind of Creative Commons license for the digital reproduction of the book. And that's what's online right now. So I'm also working behind the scenes a little bit now on a different format of the API. So I don't know if you're familiar with the JSON-P data interchange. Do you know what JSON is?
I do.
Okay, so JSON-P, JSON has the restriction of it. Ajax in general, right, has the problem that it's not cross-domain.
Okay.
Right, like you can't access a file on another server. There are cross-domain security restrictions. But JSON-P is a way to get around that. And basically what you do is you treat your JavaScript, your JSON object, you wrap it in parentheses and you give it like a random string, and you put a random string in front of that, and so it acts like a function. Like so instead of like behind the scenes, instead of doing an AJAX request, you're getting a script and executing it.
Okay.
And it executes, this object.
Okay, so the random string is basically a security measure to make sure
That's right.
that
So
you're
you-
still talking to the same client, the same server
Yeah,
every
right.
single time.
Yeah.
It's a key, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Okay.
and so
Sounds kind
like,
of WS-ish. The whole point of JSON, I thought, was to get away from all the WS star complexity, and now you're adding that back into JSON. That's
well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. This is like a relatively new phenomenon, like within the last couple of years. But like a lot of these Web 2.0 kind of things, like Twitter has a JSONP
Okay.
API, so that you can pull in feeds just through that, like so you don't have to do XML. It's kind of like to avoid the whole XML thing.
okay.
In any case, I'm working behind the scenes a little bit right now. I guess not so much behind the scenes anymore, but
Now this can
cat's
go
out
out
of
to
the bag.
literally dozens of viewers.
2 or 3 at least. No, I'm sure you have like hordes of fans. In any case, or friends. I don't know. In any case, so this will allow you to send a request like with JavaScript for very particular things in the API, and you can send that request to api.jquery.com to a special URL.
Okay.
And you just like say with certain parameters, like say, oh, I want all the AJAX methods, and it'll return an object with all of that data for you, and then you can manipulate it and
Interesting.
display it. Yeah,
Oh, very interesting.
yeah. After we're done here, I'll show you a little demo.
Okay,
that I
yeah,
have.
that'd be great. Well, Karl, thanks very much. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you,
I learned a lot
Dave.
today.
Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. So I hope that you and all of your friends will take a look at the technology behind jQuery and really embrace it.